not bow down.
Let my people go.
We will not bow down.
Let my people go.
We will not bow down.
Let my people go.
We will not bow down.
Let my people go.
We will not bow down.
Hello and welcome to episode 57 of the Croydon Constitutionalist podcast, bringing classical liberalism to South London and beyond via our YouTube channel and wherever you get your podcasts. My name is Dan Heaton and my partner in podcasting today is Mike Swadling, the co-founder of the Croydon Constitutionalists. Mike, how are things with you?
Yes, okay, Dan. It's been an interesting few days for those that follow politics. So, yes, through the intermittent rain and sunshine, it's kept me glued to a screen, which maybe I don't need to be. How about yourself?
Yeah, not too bad, thanks. Not too bad. Just about a week now until the pubs open inside. So, which with the way the weather's been for the most of the past month or so, will be welcome. Beer gardens can be lovely, but not the way the weather's been. So, Mike, what have we got to discuss today then?
So we've had lots of election results come in. We're talking about Hartlepool, the English counties, county councils and district councils, Croydon By-Elections, the London results, and we've got a chat with Oliver, the co-founder of Enact.
So, yes, the big news over the past week has been the Hartlepool By-Election, where there was a huge swing to the Tories, and they took the seat from Labour. The first time that seat has ever not been a Labour-held seat. Massive fallout from it, with the left attacking Keir Starmer's leadership. But yeah, Mike, what did you make of the result first of all?
I think even as the Conservatives were trying to lower expectations towards the sort of beginning of last week, it was clear that those lowering of expectations were we might only win quite well. But even so, I think it was quite shocking and surprising, and how well they did. I guess the downside for those of us that have looked at some of the smaller parties, none of them really went anywhere in that, and that was a bit of a shame. But there's a message being delivered in British, but particularly English politics at the moment. It's a message to the Labour Party, and certainly did the Hartlepool result deliver it.
But yes, but what is that message? There seems to be some confusion amongst the Labour Party as to what to take from this crushing defeat. That said, I thought there were some interesting comments from Khalid Mahmood, the Labour MP for Birmingham Perry Barr, who was apparently part of the shadow cabinet, but decided to step down after the result. In protest, I suppose, at the way the Labour Party is currently being run. And he said the following: Labour has lost touch with ordinary British people. A London-based bourgeoisie, with the support of brigades of woke social media warriors, has effectively captured the party. They mean well, of course, but their politics, obsessed with identity division and even tech utopianism, have more in common with those of Californian high society than the kind of people who voted in Hartlepool yesterday. The loudest voices in the Labour movement over the past year in particular have focused more on pulling down Churchill's statue than they have on helping people pull themselves up in the world. No wonder it is doing better amongst rich urban liberals and young university graduates than it is amongst the most important part of its traditional electoral coalition, the working class. I have to say, Mike, a lot of sense in that, I thought.
If only I could write that well, I would have written it. It's everything you sort of see and believe and feel. And, I've never voted Labour. I can't imagine a scenario where I ever would vote Labour, but I do think it's not unreasonable in this country that we have a party for the working man or working man and woman these days. And the Labour Party traditionally fulfilled that role, and they have gone off piece, to say the least. And they got told that in 2019. This is the shocking thing, is how hard do you have to be told the lesson? They got told this in December 2019. How, 18 months later, have they found themselves in a situation where they need to be told it again, and actually even got told it almost even harder than they were told it before? It's quite unbelievable. It's quite unbelievable. That's all I can say.
So Keir Starmer's response was to say that he would take full responsibility, and has then spent the next couple of days doing a reshuffle of his shadow cabinet. Mike, have you seen anything in this reshuffle to suggest that Labour has learnt any lessons, or that it's going to make any strides in the coming year?
Not listening, not learning, not interested in democracy, not providing an effective opposition. That's the title of a short article posted on our website, looking at the new shadow cabinet. Well, particularly looking at the 5 new people, I think, that have joined the shadow cabinet since our last article, saying, look, you've put this cabinet in place, Sir Keir, and there's no Brexiteers. In fact, there's mostly people voters type. And people that really criticise Brexit, really criticise the people that voted for Brexit, really stuck 2 fingers up at the people, at the majority of people in this country, and exactly the people Labour need to win back if they're ever to win a majority again. And lo and behold, what's he done? He's brought in Kate Green, and since then, so I think some of them may have come in before this reshuffle. Kate Green, she was part. She wants Labour for a confirmatory vote, it says on her tweet. Lucy Powell, who's been a bit more sensible. Obviously, she worked for Britain in Europe and was a Remainer. Wes Streeting, who's in favour of a second vote. Alan Campbell, who's in favour of a second vote. Shabana Mahmood, who was completely against leaving on a no deal and thought that we were wasting money even preparing for it. There is no one in there that voted for Brexit. There is no one in there that seems, frankly, non-woke. There is no one in there who seems in any way in touch with working class people and more traditional Labour movement values. But, you know, if that's what they want to do with their party, they've gone as low as they've gone since the 1920s. Let's see if they can beat the whole 20th and 21st century with the next vote.
Well, it does look as if there's going to be another test of how low Labour has gone coming up quite shortly, actually, because Tracy Brabham, the Member of Parliament for Batley and Spen, I believe she's an actress who used to be in Emmerdale. She's actually been elected as the mayor of West Yorkshire, and so is in fact stepping down as an MP. So there's going to be a by-election coming up in the next couple of months. That's going to be very interesting because, of course, that constituency was a constituency of Joe Cox, the Member of Parliament who was unfortunately and tragically murdered back in 2016. So there's going to be a lot of emotion, I imagine, from the Labour activists in that area who will be trying to save that seat. Certainly an area that went heavily for Leave. It's going to be another interesting campaign.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a bit tighter when you look at. I saw something today that extrapolated up the local election results in the area. It looks very close, and that can be a bit of a dangerous game. But it's not obvious for the Conservatives. If Labour are smart, they play a very straight bat. They're bringing someone they're bringing a local and someone that was not identified around Brexit particularly. And the Conservatives will massively play down expectations, saying that they may have won once, but lightning doesn't strike twice. I'm not massively sure either side are that smart. I'm certainly not sure at the moment Labour's that smart.
No. Well, I think one last thing to say about Hartlepool. I think it's worth mentioning that the Heritage Party came fourth, admittedly behind an independent candidate who came third. but nonetheless, they were the biggest of the other parties, if you can call the other parties the other parties. So no doubt that will be a feather in the cap for the Heritage Party, albeit, to be fair, they didn't get that many votes. It's just that they did nonetheless come forth. So, worth a mention.
Let's be honest, they got it and no one else did. Actually, just the thing that we know, of course, in Hartlepool is that with Heritage coming forth, Reform, or the Brexit Party as was, came even further down. It may have been 5th or 6th, I can't remember, but they were a very credible 3rd last time, I think, with an awfully high percentage of the votes. If you leave the field and you don't set up a local party and you don't try and build on your success, that's what's happened. And Reform definitely paid the price for not doing the sensible basic things.
Indeed, although I'm sure Richard Tice is very pleased with his decision not to select himself as the parliamentary candidate for the by-election.
Yeah.
So, obviously it wasn't just Hartlepool that was going to the polls. There were a heck of a lot of elections all around England. Tory gains all over the shop by the look of it. Conservatives took control of 13 more councils, and the number of councillors went up by 236. Labour had another shocker, down 8 councils and down 327 councillors. In fact, quite a few Labour council leaders also lost their seats. Mike, what have you got, any highlights or lowlights from the English council results?
Yeah, there was some particular seats I happened to look up, and they, more than anything, I looked at them because they all came up in a short space of time on a Twitter feed from Bristol Elects, who were tweeting out on the morning of the results, and it was just I happened to know them, no particular order or interest where they were. It was just that they all had some similarities, and I'll read you through them very quickly. There was one in Paddy and Sunderland where the Lib Dems took the seat, going up 55% in their vote share, and that was a Lib Dem gain from Labour. And Labour's vote collapsed 30%, and UKIP weren't in there, so they had previously got 28%. So the Lib Dems basically took votes from Labour and took votes that were UKIP. You then go across to Nuneaton, where there's a Conservative gain from Labour, where they go up by 40%. Labour goes down by 12%, and UKIP had been there. They weren't there this time, went down by 23%. So the Conservatives took votes from Labour and UKIP. And you then move across to West Park in South Tyneside, where the Greens won, taking it from Labour. They went up 43%. UKIP had 30% before, and there was none of them UKIP this time. And Labour went down by 14%. So the Greens took votes from Labour and UKIP. And very lastly in that run, we'll look at Ramsgate. The Conservatives took it, although actually the big move in votes was from Labour to the Greens, or a small move from Labour actually. But the Greens went up a lot, having taken what was previously the UKIP vote. So in all four places, the UKIP vote went, and it went Lib Dem, Conservative, Green, and Green, which meant Lib Dems, Conservatives, Green, and Conservatives won. Weirdly, what do I draw? Why have I told you all of that? What's really happened in all of them is people have voted not Labour. And it feels to me like there's quite a big none of the above vote. It seems unlikely that the UKIP vote went directly to the Green Party. So it makes me think those people that voted for UKIP were once voting for none of the above. They're now voting for none of the above. That happens to be the Green Party. Possibly true also with the Lib Dems in some areas. There's people sitting there and choosing not to vote Labour because these are all areas that should be strong Labour areas. And that was the main thing I think you saw coming through the last few days, was there was a whole bunch of working class people that chose not to vote Labour. Lots of them went to the Conservatives. Conservatives exponentially done well out of it because, of course, they were often the second party and they won out by Labour's votes going down. But really, by and large, there was a message from the working class that said, we're not voting for Sir Keir and his North London woke-ariety.
Indeed. Well, I mean, in terms of the smaller parties, I think the Greens did quite well in some areas, but in terms of parties that we've had conversations with on the podcast and who've written for the website, Reform UK didn't do so well overall, but did pick up 2 seats in Derby. Now, my understanding of those areas is there was a history there of UKIP, and essentially the people there who were UKIP have kind of taken on the mantle of presumably initially the Brexit Party and then the Reform UK. And so that really goes to show that if you can have some consistency in an area and you have effectively a local campaigning group, if not technically a branch within Reform UK, that there is still a market for that sort of thing.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, retail politics, knock on doors, get people out. Fair play to the Green Party, and that's a phrase you won't often hear me say. They ran more councillors than they do normally, so they were in a position to benefit from these votes. No doubt in areas where they've done particularly well, like Bristol, they into a local market that was very much there for them. There are a lot of Green sympathetic people, but sometimes it's just a case of being on the door, making your face seen, and people will go for you because why not? They're not pleased with anyone else, and you've got to be in it. And Reform had left up, but hopefully they will now come back on it.
Well, of course, it wasn't just all over England where there were council elections. There were 5 by-elections right here in Croydon. No shockers from the results, though. No change whatsoever in terms of which party represented which ward, which is a bit interesting considering that Croydon Council, of course, went bust recently. Mike, what did you make of the results in the 5 wards?
Something bitterly disappointing to me with local democracy, that you have a council that's gone bankrupt, and at the end you have 5 by-elections, which is a pretty good spread. Certainly one of them was probably up for grabs to some extent, but it was some possibility in New Allington North of it switching, and you see no change. And it does just feel, what does the council have to do to change the way people vote? And it's not necessarily great for local democracy, but there we go. Really, what did I make of it? I think we said before there wasn't likely to be a change because of the size of all of the parties. There was a swing to the Conservatives, I think, pretty much everywhere. I've done a bit of an analysis of what I think it might do to the overall vote in Croydon in 2022, assuming you saw a similar swing. And the swings were very different in different areas. In New Allington, the swing was very big. In some of the other areas, it was much, much smaller. In essence, it feels to me that, a similar swing next time. Addiscombe East would likely return 2 Conservative candidates. New Allington South would likely return 2 Conservative candidates, but it doesn't feel like anywhere else is going to return Conservative candidates. They get quite close in Norbury Park, surprisingly, and they get quite close in Wadden, but neither of them breach it. So who knows, if the Labour Party were to fall further back, then they might struggle. But what probably will be a high point for the Conservatives nationally and in Borough, it doesn't bode well for the council changing next time.
One thing I thought was a bit of a disappointing result for the Liberal Democrats in South Norwood, only getting 6.3% of the vote and coming behind the Green Party. I'd have thought that the Lib Dems might have done better in South Norwood.
Yes, and they've put on a good campaign there. Now, I think the South Norwood that they had done a little bit better in is now Crystal Palace and Upper Norwood ward, and that might be part of it. But still, certainly, you would think that would be a natural area for the Lib Dems to do okay in. As I'm just glancing down the results, they seem to have polled sort of 6 or 7% everywhere. Ironically, of course, the Green Party done quite well in South Norwood with 9.3%. So maybe that's where some of that natural Lib Dem vote went. Their leader, whose name escapes me, being as impactful as ever.
Indeed. Well, I mean, it is interesting to see that perhaps the let's call it the liberal left, if we really want to call it that, vote is being split in some areas, not necessarily coalescing behind the Labour Party as much as you might think, and people are voting Green and to a much lesser extent Liberal Democrat. And indeed in South Norwood and in Woodside, they were taking the Initiative Party candidates who got 5% and I think 4% each in the different wards. So again, a little bit of splitting whatever vote that is. So yeah, interesting to see how that develops.
I think there's got to be slightly careful. I always think we're talking about splitting votes. A councillor who I won't name, but who was completely ineffective as his role, chairing the scrutiny committee. No scrutiny whatsoever. That's not me saying that. That's paraphrasing the council's auditors. As saying about, we on the progressive left need to get together. Really, this was a massive vote for progressive forces against conservatism, and so on and so forth. I don't think you want to make the automatic assumption that people that voted Lib Dem and Green would vote Labour, given the chance, given the choices. As I talk about some of the national picture, I'm not certain that the 18% of people that appear to have voted UKIP and are now voting Green in Ramsgate, or the 28% of people that appear to vote UKIP and are now voting Lib Dem in Sunderland would automatically switch back to the Labour Party if they were to form one alliance. And indeed, there's an awful lot of people that vote Lib Dem or won't vote Lib Dem because they were in coalition with the Conservatives, and of course there are a certain amount of people that vote Lib Dem because they are prepared to be in coalition with the Conservatives. So, it's a very dangerous game to assume that everyone on one side is aligned like that. And I wonder if that splitting, who knows how many people voted Green or because they wanted to be away from Labour, and if someone got in bed with them, they just won't vote for any of them.
Well, I think those are fair comments, but we need to move on now to the London election results. And Sadiq Khan, unsurprisingly, was re-elected, but a lot closer than predicted. It did actually go to a second preference vote, at which point Sadiq Khan got lots of second preference votes, possibly from those people whose first choice was another party of the progressive left. So yeah, he ended up with about 55% of the vote after you take into account the second preferences. But yeah, Sean Bailey didn't do too bad actually in the first round.
I think it came as a shock to everyone. It came not least of all a shock to Sean Bailey's camp and the Conservative Party, who had somewhat written him off. And they get a lot of criticism for that. You and I know, having done it, you do have to prioritise your resources. Invariably, when we've been doing anything, our resources were pretty much you and I. So you do have to prioritise. Maybe the Conservatives won't write off London quite as much going forwards. And also, I'm not sure the way for them to work well in London is by being the sort of Sadiq light candidate. Maybe they need to show a bit more guts and vigour, and as Boris did, and how they won it originally some years ago.
Indeed, they need to get a charismatic character, I think, for the next time. So yes, it's going to be 3 years of Sadiq Khan because the term shortened, given that his previous term was extended. So yeah, it'll be another 3 years before we have these set of elections. Just looking at how the other candidates did, Lawrence Fox for the Reclaim Party 1.9%, coming in sixth. Peter Gammons of UKIP, 0.6%. David Curtin, friend of the podcast, for the Heritage Party, 0.4%. Steve Kelleher, who we recently had on the podcast from the SDP, he came in with 0.3%. But I think it's worth saying that Count Binface did get 1%. So I'm not sure what the lesson is there, but yeah, not a good night for the some of those smaller parties, smaller patriotic parties, should we call them?
Interesting, just on that, Lawrence Fox, when you take into account second preference as well, and it's very hard to know quite how to measure that, but I see Lawrence Fox on about 6.6%, UKIP on about 4.6%, the SDP on 1.5%, David on 1.3%. So I think 6.6 being the high watermark then, because lots of them would have given second preferences to each other. That feels like the right sort of level of support of a new UKIP. I'm sure they wouldn't want to be called that, but of that sort of party, a cause party to the right would probably get in London, because that's not far off where UKIP were. So he seems to have got that there. There's just maybe just hurt slightly by the splitting of that vote. I know they didn't quite get enough votes between them to get one assembly member, but again, you wonder if there was a bit more of one banner for those parties to get behind. They may have got one assembly member out of it, but alas, not the case.
Indeed, on the assembly, there are 11 Labour, 9 Tory, 3 Green, and 2 Lib Dem. So can't say about every single Tory, but looks like it's going to be a pretty woke GLA that is unlikely to be holding Sadiq Khan to account very much.
It's the Lib Lab Green Con. They all believe the same thing. They all believe in taking your freedom away from you. They want more taxes. They want to make it harder for you to go about your daily lives and your business. I don't know, how can they challenge each other when they already are in lockstep? Losing the 2 UKIP members or ex-UKIP members, so Peter Whittle and David Curtin, is, I think, a huge blow for accountability in London. Just want to say one thing about, I found quite interesting looking at the Croydon and Sutton result. I'm looking at a number of years, so 2012, 2016 to 2021. I would assume Croydon and Sutton has probably become more Labour in that time, particularly the Croydon part of that. You would think it would be possibly less Lib Dem over that time. And obviously there's a UKIP vote that's come and gone during that time. So you kind of wonder what's happened with that. But just some headline figures. The Conservatives have won each of those elections on 39%, and this time on 41%. Labour on those elections have got 33, 32 and 31%. Interestingly, the Greens have gone from 6.6 to 7.4 to 9.9. So they've seen a slow improvement and maybe taking some of that from Labour. And the Lib Dems have gone 14.2 down to 10 and back up to 14.4. That's a long way of saying, there's a lot of numbers there, but a long way of saying that's really barely changed at all over 3 elections. Over 3 elections that are 9 years. And that certainly surprised me. I expected to see a very different trend there.
Well, I'd now like to welcome to the podcast Oliver Bielski, the co-founder of Enact, a new political party that endorses direct democracy. Oliver, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me on. Perfect with the surname.
Thank you very much. Mike, I think you've got a few questions for Oliver.
Yeah, Oliver, thanks ever so much for joining us. So first of all, we've just had some elections in the UK and some of the results have come in as we're recording this. What are your sort of general thoughts on those, and what do you see as the shortcomings of these various systems that's led to the Enact party being set up?
Well, it wasn't these elections that motivated Enact being set up, but the results today, essentially what they say to me is just a resounding rejection of the 2 major parties. People have voted in big numbers for the Liberal Democrats and anything that says other or an independent councillor. That tells us that there's a big space out there that needs filling, and hopefully we can get other or people that voted for other to congregate around the idea of direct democracy. And that's how Enact can move in to the political sphere easily, or more easily done, by way of Enact not having a bias. We're not a left-wing or a right-wing party, so we don't appeal to one person or another. We just appeal to people that want to have more of a say on things, which, the way the world is going, we would say that will prove to be enormously popular.
That's excellent. So talk there about the parties not right wing or left wing as such. Can you tell us a little bit about the party, and then effectively what's the Enact system, how that would work should you win election, have the chance to introduce it?
Yes, well, the party has been set up by myself and the other co-founder, Tim Jones, and we're both ski instructors, which may not sound like the perfect base for politics, but actually ski instructors have been very widely affected by recent political events. Scottish independence referendum, and there's a lot of Scottish British ski instructors, then Brexit, of course, and now COVID that's shut down the whole industry. So that was part of the motivation, not the only, but part of the motivation for setting up Enact. And although we're not qualified in the sense of have a degree in politics and philosophy and that sort of thing, our recent leaders have had those sorts of qualifications, and I wouldn't say they've done brilliantly. So I think an education in politics can give you more of an education in the history of politics, but it doesn't mean, or it certainly in the case of our recent leaders, doesn't prove that you can lead things going forward. Indeed, part of how Enact works is that I'm not trying to lead us forward. Direct democracy is all about the people planning their own route and taking the country in the way that society wants to go at the pace it wants to go there.
Okay, so obviously the system, as you say, people will kind of pass laws and make changes more directly. But who does that leave in charge of the company? What happens to the MPs and the parties we've got today?
Well, there are still MPs and there will still be parties. You'll still vote for an MP, and whoever the largest party is will have a leader, and therefore that will be the Prime Minister. They will select a cabinet to be in charge of the various government systems. We endorse direct democracy, but it is designed to, our system is designed to slot in seamlessly with what we currently have. So there's no big upheaval of, oh, now we have this political system and now we're moving to a whole new different one. That's not what Enact is endorsing. We're willing to work with what we've got now, and everything will remain the same for voters, apart from the fact that you will be able to log in on your laptop, on your phone, and you will be the party whip. You will tell your MP how to vote and what things you would like to see done. That's the main difference.
Yeah, absolutely. So looking at that and how and obviously people put in ideas, they get pulled together as a law, and people get to vote on them. I'm looking at your website. It mentions those policies that you're voting on being fully costed. Now that rings alarm bells for me from the old Brexit campaign days.
Yeah.
Who costs those policies, and how do you ensure they're unbiased?
Well, that will be done if you're putting a proposal forward. Firstly, we should say that it needs to go through an individual rights check, simply done by lawyers, not gatekeepers or decisive things. We already have individual rights laws in place. So silly, stupid policies can't come to the fore. After that, the independent costings, as we mentioned, again, that's paid for by the proposal creators, whoever's coming up with the idea, and there is a chance there for it to be biased, although everything being open source, and therefore everyone can review it, comment on it, see their workings, it's much less likely to be. Whichever independent economist puts his name to the work will be out in the public sphere for ridicule and anything else. Also, once your proposal is finalized and you feel that it's finalized, it goes through a process of blind peer review, just like any science. So you won't know who's reviewing your work or how many people are reviewing it. And they won't know you, so they won't have their biases as to whether they like you or not. Then from there, it goes through, well, simply the results come to a traffic light system of a green is a pass and the no facts that can be done with it. A red is a fail, and the proposal creator can then try and go through the evidence-based challenge in order to see if they're facts and which ones add up, and it will go through peer review again. And an amber is still a pass, like on traffic lights, but it means there are predictions in there, and therefore it's not possible to know, like Brexit. So proposals would come through for what to do about Brexit. Some would be red, some would be green, and most of them, I would imagine, because they're working on economic prediction models, would be an amber, and that will be then warned to the voters. Like, you can vote for this, but be warned it may not work out that way because it's not possible to know. And we think that hiding stuff like that from voters is never a good idea. That's what politicians try to do now. If you're not certain on something, just say you're not certain.
And I suppose, thanks for that. I suppose, so to me, and maybe just talking through, I'm a big fan of the Laffer curve. My concern is there's a tax that raises 100 billion, and someone says we put it up 10%, we'll raise 110 billion. And if you cut it 10%, we'll only raise 90 billion. And in my mind, actually, the opposite is true. If you cut the tax, you'll probably raise more revenue because more people will do it. And if you increase the tax, fewer people will do it, and you probably raise less revenue. How does it cope with something? How does that work?
Well, yeah, we get this question a lot. Won't all the poor people vote to tax the hell out of the rich? Well, it's covered in individual rights. You can't go after someone's money that they've already got. That would be targeting a minority. Weirdly, the rich would be protected by individual rights in that circumstance. So you can't go after what people have already got. Enact is not about righting historical wrongs, however they got that money. But going forwards, of course, you could tax the rich more and say, 99% tax on anyone earning whatever. And you might think, or people might think, that would be enormously popular. But in my experience, voters are actually much smarter than what people give them credit for. And there would be something like, let's say, 3 proposals. One that says, abolish income tax. Nobody likes it, especially the rich. They hate it. And one that says, tax the rich 99%, they can afford it. When they can't, and they'll just take all their jobs and our prosperity with them. And then you'll get something coming through like a Laffer curve proposing this tax rate gains the lowest rate for all of us, but yet the highest amount of revenue because people aren't trying to avoid the tax, except, well, you know how it works. What of those 3 proposals do you think will be the most popular? If you think people are stupid and don't know what they're voting for, you've heard that line before, then you might think one of the other 2, but actually people are quite smart in their voting, especially individually. When they're voting in their own home, on their own mobile phone or their own laptop, they'll do what's right for them and right for the country and their families. So you'll get something smart, like a Laffer curve analysed proposal for the tax system.
So sorry, so will people vote on this app, and that app will say, right, such a body lives in this constituency, so that's 1 vote for option A, B or C, and that then feeds through to their MP, and their MP in Parliament, or at least the Enact MP, then has to follow what the majority of the votes for the people who live in their constituency is. Is that how it works?
Yes, well, proposals come forwards and the voters will simply rank those proposals, favourite to least favourite. From that, we can deduce what the most popular proposal was, and that goes to the final vote, which you could call a referendum, but that's a toxic word nowadays. And the final vote establishes whether there's majority support to do whatever it is we're doing. And it's either no change or yes, go ahead and do it.
If that works, where you've got so if you have an Enact majority in Parliament,
yep.
Okay, so you would then enact an Enact bill, let's call it that, and that would then mean that this system that you're proposing would become the system. But if you've got half a dozen MPs and there are questions coming up in Parliament and matters to be voted upon, how will people know which way the Enact MP that that's been elected in a particular constituency, which way they are going to vote on any particular issue?
Well, the way they vote on it won't entirely matter. It depends whether whether the voters are voting on a local, a countrywide, or a nationwide issue. So on local things, which tend to be policies, not law, it's not different laws for one area of the country or another, you'll be telling your MP and the council will inform you, and it will all be through the app as to what's happening there. And the MP will still represent you in Parliament, in Prime Minister's questions, but that will be of less importance, obviously. Then on national issues, laws like the tax that we were talking about, there's not a different tax rate in Leicestershire compared to Nottinghamshire, so it would just be a national vote. And as to how your constituents voted on that issue, it will be how the nation votes as to what the MPs will then do.
Okay, so you say there's no different tax system in Leicestershire than Nottinghamshire, but of course there is, because there's council taxes. And one way that in some parts of the world in particular, that local taxation is raised, it can be a local income tax, but it's often a tax on property. So you said earlier about, there could be a law that, you said taxes the rich 99% or whatever on income going forward. And
I said there couldn't be, but yes.
Well, but you said that they probably wouldn't be passed, but there could be if that's what people decided to do. If having received all the evidence that, as you've described,
yep,
they could vote for that. But you were saying that individual rights would be protected, and so that wealth that had been acquired already,
yep,
would be safe. But wealth could involve a property.
Yes.
So a few years ago, some people were talking about what they described as a mansion tax, which would be effectively a tax on properties worth over £1 million, or although that soon became £2 million when the member of Parliament for Twickenham was involved in it and said, "Oh no, that's the £1 million won't buy you very much in Twickenham." So I think it's important to note that there are different levels of tax, different types of tax potentially in different parts of the country.
Locally, yes, but they're not different laws in place that generate those taxes to begin with. They are applied at different percentages in different places. But the idea that there's council tax happens everywhere. That's what I meant by that. So if we were to make a local change by the council to your council tax rates, the councils will continue to do that. On the Enact website, we have the bit that is titled Local Councils in the How It Works page. And all changes, not every action, but all changes, proposed changes that the councils wish to do will go onto the Enact system with a simple red flag system for local voters. So that's more hyper local voting, almost assembly like, but without actually being an assembly. It's just on your phone. Anything that the council does that you don't like, you can put a red flag by that. And if it's sufficiently disapproved of enough, the council will have to have a look at that and change their ways and their plans. In the same way that we have petitions for national issues, if it gets enough signatures, then whatever the government is doing will be halted and we'll go to proposals and a final vote to see what we should do about it. Same sort of system, but different for local councils. So if they want to put their council tax rates up enormously, that will get a lot of red flags, and the council will have to rethink that and engage with people via the app and their usual methods to resolve it.
Just so again, thank you for that. I suppose one question, I know you're not committed to any policies or anything, but is there any laws you think or local laws, national or local, or things that might get passed as a result of this that perhaps wouldn't have otherwise?
Well, we were talking to someone on a podcast earlier about that, and they suggested that the House of Lords could soon be abolished and become a tourist attraction to generate some money. That could probably come through and be quite popular. What else? It's hard to know. It's hard to, everyone says they know what voters are thinking, but there's millions of people. I would imagine something on corporation tax and big corporations dodging tax or even getting tax rebates. I'd imagine something will be done along those lines to close all loopholes with that, or as many as they can. They're two things that I could, one more serious than the other, but they would be two.
I guess one concern that might be raised about this would it be a bit regressive? So it's unlikely most equality laws over the years would have passed based on public opinion polls. Do you see that as being a risk or a problem with this system?
They wouldn't have passed based on opinion polls. They may not have passed at the time they were passed, but I think if we're talking about any law that provides equality of opportunity, then those things do come along as and when society is ready to give them. So it may not have happened as soon. And indeed, part of Enact is that things will move at the pace society wants them to move. Again, other people have quoted the climate change and the crisis, and electric cars are coming to the fore and in many ways being, or some people feel, being enforced upon people. And some people want an electric car because they think it's great for the environment and lowers their fuel bill, and other people don't. They're diehards. And if it's enforced on people like no more petrol cars beyond 2030, that's a top-down imposition. Whereas if it changes over time, as environmental policy would with Enact, it happens when society is ready. So I think equality of opportunity laws are very likely to pass. Equality of outcome laws, which is essentially enforced unfairness, anything that we might have coming forward like that, it would be very unlikely to pass. But that's a good thing. We want things to be fair.
No, I couldn't agree more. The idea that the idea that in a democracy you actually get what the people want. That's it's radical. It's radical, and it might never catch on in Britain. So I suppose my last question then for you is how do you see yourself sparking an interest in people, sparking that, getting people to rally around this cause? Obviously we've had the Green parties over my lifetime, certainly, come to the fore. UKIP came to the fore, the SNP, indeed. Yeah. But then, of course, the SNP have come to the fore, if you like. What's the kind of spark that you see sets you out and will get you into?
In all honesty, we are still obviously looking for our big break, and I'm just going to keep doing as many podcasts and as many interviews as we can. And as we get more donations through our website and the membership grows, we'll be making YouTube videos and explainer videos for all this on our YouTube channel, targeting the political YouTubers for, again, more interviews, local papers. That's just all about us getting as visible as possible. In regard to the spark, in regard to the thing that we have that other parties simply cannot offer, A, giving people a say, but B, we don't have a left or right agenda. And as our Twitter followers show, we've got centrists, older centrists, younger centrists, we've got left-wing people, we've got right-wing people that would not agree on anything if we had them on a chat. But they can at least agree that if they had a say on what's happening in this country, or a much greater say than what they currently have, they can at least agree on that. And then, once we have that greater say, the things that get done, will be coming from the bottom up. The people want it, so it's being done. Not everything, because we have checks, balances in place for that. But what the people vote for shall then be carried out by their MPs and their politicians, as it should be. The people will be the party whip, is essentially what I'm saying. And at least the left and the right can agree that that's a good way to go. So that's the spark that we've got and the thing we've got going for us.
Brilliant. Thank you for that.
So, Oliver, how can people learn more about this, and how can they get involved?
Well, I mentioned Twitter. We're on there. It's simply @GoEnact. But the main thing is the website, goenact.uk. You can have a read about it. The How It Works page is already, it's not fully finished yet. It's a work in progress, and you are dealing with two people that work in outdoor education. So the spelling is not always the best, but yeah, go enact.uk. The membership button is there. You can join for free, unlike many political parties. We do ask if you join for free, you at least share it. But likewise, you can donate and give what you can. The more you can give, the quicker we can make all this happen.
Well, thank you very much, and we'll certainly keep an eye out for your progress over the next few years.
Yes, well, thank you for having me. Thanks for the opportunity.
So, Mike, what have we got on our website at the moment?
So we've had lots of articles up for the election and otherwise. Firstly, otherwise, Josh has been writing for us again and taking a look at universal basic income, some of the pros and cons, particularly from a libertarian perspective. So well worth a read and have a look at that. In preparation for the elections, but still well worth a listen now, Zach Sterling, the Heritage candidate on their GLA list, but also in the Kennedy by-election, we did a pubcast with him. So if you subscribe to this, subscribe to our pubcast as well, and you can download and you hear Towers from the pub, and Zach and I went out to the Shirley Inn to record that. Nigel Jacklin of the Democratic Network gave us an interview. This is a new party running a number of candidates, very much focused on delivering what local people want in areas, being much less driven by mandates and much less driven by manifestos. Have a read of his views and how they're set up. Eric Siver-Joffe, and apologies to Eric for my mispronunciation there, I'm sure. He was the head of the SDP London GLA list. He's also the London representative to SDP Youth. We've done an interview with him, talks about why he's in the SDP. Again, quite an interesting article, and someone that wouldn't have remembered the SDP the first time round. Robert Pole, we published a leaflet on our site. He was the Reform Party candidate in Croydon and Sutton. Worth having a look, just gives you a bit more info about them and what they were aiming to do. And lastly, as I've already mentioned, provided an update on the shadow cabinet and the new joiners, shall we say, since we provided an update in about a year ago, and just a little look at their Brexit credentials and, shall we say, certainly not their democratic credentials. So yeah, have a look, and would be great to hear from you and give us your feedback.
Well, if you'd like to write for our website or have any stories you'd like us to cover, please do contact us. You can do so via the Twitter at Croydon Const, via Facebook, via our website, croydonconstitutionalist.uk, or via email, croydonconstitutionalists@gmail.com. Well, do please subscribe to the podcast and the pubcast. The pubs are opening, so we'll be in there with some more pubcasts. Do please subscribe to the YouTube channel. Do please like, share, and leave a review. It's always good to get feedback, and it helps others to find the podcast. Thanks once again to Oliver for joining us on the podcast, and thank you once again to you all for listening. Until next time, it's goodbye from me.
And it's goodbye from me.
Stay safe, everybody.